Kenmore City Council is now in session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)I. The City Council will now enter into executive session to discuss pending and potential litigation. The session is slated to last 60 minutes until approximately 7 p.m. No final action is expected. Amending my previous announcement, the online version of the agenda was different than the one that I was reading from, and the online version also includes it says that the council will also discuss real estate acquisition pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)B. Other than that, nothing's changed. We'll be out here around 7. Kenmore City Council has left its executive session. We're going to adjourn the special meeting and call the regular meeting to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Culver.
Present.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Sassen.
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik. Here. Councilmember Lutzis.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
All present.
All right. Next on the agenda is our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the city of Kenmore is situated upon the ancestral lands of the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Soxhawtl, Duwamish, Stillaguamish, Tulalip, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and other tribes who are part of the Coast Salish peoples. We recognize and express our deepest respect for their enduring stewardship and profound relationship with this land, which they have cherished and protected since time immemorial. We honor the First Peoples, acknowledge their vibrant cultures, and commit ourselves to learning from their wisdom in our journey to promote justice, equity, and mutual understanding. We pledge to stand alongside these communities in acknowledging past injustices and working towards a future that respects and celebrates the diverse heritage of this land. Now, if you would all please stand and join me in the flag salute. Next on the agenda is agenda approval. Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved.
Mr. Chair. Consent agenda would be later, right?
That's later, yes.
Okay, correct. Thank you.
Okay. So hearing no objections, the agenda stands approved. Next, we have a proclamation for Juneteenth, and we'll be doing a celebration for that this Wednesday at the Farmers Market. Whereas on the first day of January in the year 1863, the Honorable President Abraham Lincoln issued a momentous decree known as the Emancipation Proclamation, a pivotal step in the long and arduous journey to abolish the inhumane institution of slavery in the United States. And whereas the culmination of this struggle, the cessation of slavery, gave birth to a day of profound significance known as Juneteenth. This day is acknowledged as the oldest recognized public commemoration of the cessation of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth is not only a commemoration of the liberation of African Americans from the bonds of slavery, but also serves as a grand celebration of the strides made towards improving education and increasing opportunity within the African American community. It honors the courage, resilience, and determination that led to their freedom and progress. And whereas, on a broader scale, the celebration of Juneteenth serves as a poignant reminder for every citizen of the hallowed promises that form the bedrock of the American dream: freedom, equality, and the opportunity for all to pursue their ambitions without hindrance or prejudice. And whereas on the 13th day of May in the year 2021, Governor Jay Inslee gave assent to House Bill 1016, thereby officially declaring Juneteenth a statewide holiday and generously granting a paid day off for state workers starting in 2022, a recognition that deeply honors the importance of this day. And whereas in alignment with this declaration, the Kenmore City Council adopted resolution number 22-381, thereby affirming Juneteenth as an official city holiday, a testament to the city's commitment to remembering our history and promoting equality. And whereas despite over 155 years having passed since the formal conclusion of chattel slavery in the United States, the nation continues to grapple with the deeply ingrained and pervasive remnants of discriminatory systems and structural racism that still affects many aspects of our society. And whereas the city of Kenmore is steadfastly dedicated to creating a city where all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background, feel safe, respected, and loved in their place of residence, fostering a culture of inclusivity and unity. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2024, as a day to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth throughout the City of Kenmore. We urge all residents to unite with the City Council in this meaningful observance to honor the past, celebrate the progress, and work together towards a future of true equality and justice for all. Mr. City Manager, where's the fun?
We don't have anything for tonight.
Okay, then. Well, I would say look forward to the fun on Wednesday when we're at the farmers market and the Juneteenth celebration. All right, next up is public comments. I want to welcome folks to the council's meeting. Please address your comments to the mayor and the council. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will call your name when it is your turn. Please state your name and city of residence and keep within the allotted time. To make every person feel welcome and safe here, please refrain from booing, clapping, heckling, yelling, or other interruptions. The meeting is recorded for transparency. Thank you for being here and for sharing your input respectfully. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 guests on site wishing to speak for general public comment, Elizabeth Mooney and Patrick O'Brien.
Hi, council and staff and citizens. Elizabeth Mooney, citizen of Kenmore, and president of PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore. So I'm really proud to say, and thank you all for having Farmers Market. We're going to be the nonprofit there on Juneteenth. And so please come over and say hi to us at the table. We're still kind of trying to figure out what we're going to do that would honor both Juneteenth and also the environmental education and our volunteers. I think one of our friends is going to talk about rain gardens. We're going to talk about PERC's interests and maybe put together a kind of mosaic of what PERC does, so you can come out and learn and maybe find members that want to sign up and do work. So each block, maybe you'll put together a quilt, like bringing coho salmon back into Chitchatl, etc. So the other thing has to do with just how to protect citizens and honoring some of my old friends. One person is Ann Hurst. She died several years ago of ovarian cancer. Her daughter lives in the city, and anyway, all sorts of good things to say about Ann Hurst. Really smart woman. And long ago, I'm going to read you just from, I'll send you this copy, but I'm just going to read to you something because sometimes we forget all the history that people have dug up that has to do with our environment. So this is pretty serious because you all, I know, are going to potentially be considering paying for testing from grants for our water and land out there near the shoreline. So this is called, she had something called Basin News. She lost it at some point because the computer crashed. But in my old emails, I was looking up from Bayside Disposal. This has to do with Lake Point. It wasn't called Lake Point back then. So this is from some people who were called Bayside Disposal. It's from the Federal Register. And it says, I have to choose the options of waste types that were dumped there. Organics, inorganics, solvents, pesticides, heavy metals, acids, mixed municipal waste, unknown. Source of waste: construction, fertilizer, paper printing, iron, steel foundry, chemical general, plating, polishing, electrical conductors, transformers. Transformers is where PCBs are. Utility companies, sanitary refuse, photo finish, lab, hospital, and unknown. So be careful and please figure out how to
Thank you.
protect citizens.
Mr. O'Brien.
Patrick O'Brien, Kenmore. I'm ready to take some heat today for the citizens of Kenmore because we're wasting $30 to $50 million on the maintenance facility. It was bought and sold to you with a faulty information. It's clear that the evaluation process was corrupted intentionally with the approval of the manager, Rob Carlindsey. He is now trying to cover his tracks and will come up with every excuse he can, namely to set the setback from the Heron rookery to set all the investigation into a cover-up, an additional cover-up. As such, He's engaged with Sound Transit not to acquire that property, letting them acquire the property. The city of Kenmore is now going to spend $30 to $50 million of taxpayers' dollars on the facility that was never voted on by the taxpayers. The city council on the selection committee were lied to. That be Deborah Shrebnick and Melanie O'Kane, who were told the old fire station was not available, not for sale. It turns out not true as per affidavit. Before you spend one more dime on the maintenance facility, the plans and development, you should put everything on hold. The purchase and sale agreement and all relevant information on this project. It's possible that Joe formerly worked for someone who has been deeply involved in land acquisition and where the city paid double the going real estate price. All these council people should recuse themselves from further voting and await an outcome through an investigation by an independent investigative body. Not to recuse yourself only furthers the doubt that people have on the city of Kenmore and the integrity of our government. Tons of time to better when I write it down. During the coffee with council on Saturday, concerning the maintenance facility came up, and our mayor tried to cover that up with statements saying that the setbacks to the Heron Rookery did not allow us to purchase the property because we couldn't build on it. And yet a fellow citizen pointed out that Sound Transit hopes to build a 5-story parking property on the periphery of that setback, to which the mayor said that's outside the setback area. Yes, really? And just buy the property if you're going to get it, and you could get it for 3, 5 million. Anything under 30 million would be a bargain, and then lease it back to Sound Transit and make some money. The worst thing you can do is reward any underhanded tactics.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Oh, darn it.
Mayor Herbig, we have one person signed up to speak virtually. Maybe moving on to that.
Okay.
Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We hear you. Go on.
Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. In the next few months, hundreds of high rent increases and fees will again go into effect. Some will include newly added utility fees. At the same time, other utility fees are going up due to the city-approved taxes and increases. We need the directed discounts for seniors, veterans, those with disabilities at the lowest and fixed incomes for garbage rates, sewer and water, impact park fees, car registration to go into effect now. We need you to be the watchdog of PSC claims of up to 45% discounts, as we, the seniors with those disabilities, have only seen 10%. I forwarded articles concerning the dark practices of the manufactured home senior communities. We need our city to be part of the solution to keep residents healthy and housed. Joining several other organizations, representatives, senators, other cities supporting rent stabilization bill, protecting and preservations of the mobile home community zoning, adding no junk or franchise fees to tenant protections for extremely low affordable housing. The facts are, for every $100 increase of rent causes homelessness to increase by 9%. Our most vulnerable are being priced out yet again with $200 increases. The questions for the council and staff are, what will happen when 100 additional Kenmore residents show up at the encampment after being priced out? Can the 1.2 million ARPA funds be used to keep our most vulnerable Kenmore residents housed this year as they face these rent increases? Why was the award-winning Mercy housing 30% senior, veterans, and disabilities as with homeless barrier housing RFP overlooked? Who directed, misled, and misrepresented the non-barrier supportive housing? Is Kenmore really financially sustainable when we continually to see taxpayer dollars wasted in directions of extras and luxuries, employee benefits over budget projects, hiring with no cutback on budgets from departments? even stated the need for public works equipment facility is missing the mark, not even providing for the priority of equipment, as well as way above the budget. Residents brought forward the opportunity of an alternative, low fraction of the cost, but great match criteria availability of the old firehouse that was left out of review by misinformation. The need for council to review each and every project for instances of over budget and if it's a right fit for Kenmore is needed. When will the excuses end? When will we stop seeing missteps? 13 additional public works administrators were hired, yet consultants are still used. Staff should not be spending higher than business as usual. We are still seeing.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Valenzuela. Mayor, that concludes our speakers list.
I want to thank everybody who came and testified. We appreciate your public comments. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember Culver.
I would like to remove item D, please.
Would you like to remove an item from consent?
To remove it from the consent agenda, yes.
Yeah, just tell me what item it is and it's automatically, one member can take anything off of consent. So
Item D, thank you.
item D. All right. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item D.
So moved.
Okay, I think we had a motion from Councilmember Culver, a second
Yeah.
from, I was going to say Councilmember Shrubnik. Any discussion on consent agenda items A through C? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda minus item D is approved. That brings us directly to item D, authorize the city manager to execute contract number 24-C3061 with Wagner Architects and Planners for the final design of the Public Works Operations Center in a sum not to exceed $2,035,500. Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, can we have my coworkers come up and talk a little bit about this contract?
Or you just would like some questions answered, or what would you like?
Maybe
us
you
to-
could just provide a quick summary of what the contract is.
Sure. This contract, I'm sorry, I'm just going to bring up the agenda because I don't have it in front of me. This contract is for the final design of the Public Works Operations Center located at the property at 202nd off of just near the Kenmore Middle School. Sorry. We've done lots of conceptual design up to this point, and we've brought it to your in front of you multiple times, but this is actually for the final proposed design for the site for ready to go to construction. This will include all of the design for the administrative building, the proposed potential shop location. So we don't know exactly how far our budget will go. We'll just see how the bids come in. We're hoping the bids come in as good as they are right now because they're coming in under engineers' estimates right now. So hopefully by the time we go out to bid, we'll have the same climate. If we can't afford to build a shop space, we will still plan to develop the site, parking lot improvements, and hopefully some covered storage area. But the primary focus of the project will be the administrative building, which is 10,000 square feet, that will house all of Public Works operations and the Environmental Services Department. We are going to be designing in environmental sustainable features, and we'll be required to put some in as part of the new building code that include EV charging stations and some solar. We'll also be building the site to make those systems expandable as more requirements come online and we transition our fleet to EV. We'll be installing more EV in the future and hopefully solar on the whole, on all rooftops of any structure on the site. We will be designing the entire site to handle all of the stormwater needs for the future build out of the site so that we can still use a site even if we're not going to be developing it all the way. So we'll be designing the surface water so it could, you know, can handle all of the development on the site if we are going to build out the whole site. But that's not necessarily needed at this time, but that's what our plan is. Do you have anything to add on the surface water? I think that pretty much wraps it up. Is there any questions that I can answer?
Councilor Culver?
Yeah, I've got a few. Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, the sort of stated intent up to this point has been that this will not include the shop space, right? That's sort of a bonus if we have the money, but at this point, it's not in sort of our expectation, right?
It'll be
Or
an
hasn't
ad
been to date.
alternative.
An alternative.
An
Okay.
ad alternative. So we'll get a bid for it. If it fits in the budget, we'll include it. If not, we won't move forward with it.
Okay, and to date, though, we haven't anticipated that this bid and the money involved would be able to, right? That has been our current thinking to date.
We don't know.
We don't know. Okay, 10-4. On the environmental friendly features, the solar, the geothermal, et cetera. I know this is going to be part of what had made the plans for it particularly expensive. I forget the exact wording, but there
I'm
was
sorry, I couldn't understand what you said first.
Yeah, the solar, thank you. The solar and geothermal features, which I'm in green, I'm all for, generally speaking. But I know that some of the earlier planning, and I don't have the specifics in front of me, but it was acknowledged that adding those in would significantly increase the amount for this project, right?
That's correct. And that's the direction the council, those were options the council wanted to include in the project.
Correct. And part of that was also that if we wound up under budget, we might add those in as sort of a nice to have, an add-on. But as things have sort of gone, we've actually reached out for grant money to recoup those from federal sources. That's right. Isn't that how we've gone about it so far?
That's correct, except for the building code changed by the time that we've gone out. So since we brought this to council, since the building code changed, EV charging is a requirement, and so are some solar panels.
Gotcha. Okay. And a lot of this funding was approved very late in December, right? Like December 1st or 2nd week of December, right?
The final stages of funding, which are the bond measure, but the other funding was approved earlier than that.
Yeah, the final financing amount was approved at the December 4th, 2023 City Council meeting.
Sure. So just before this current council with 3 new members took office. 10-4. I think we have some more facts in front of us, and I think given that this has repeatedly come up from members of the public who have had questions and raised concerns, and I think in the context of the financial sustainability crisis that we are in, even if we have a different bucket for operating and for budget, et cetera, I think at a minimum for transparency, I think this is something that warrants a larger, more public discussion. I know this specific agenda item is just one contract for $2 million, which is a comparatively small amount of money for a $22.5 million project. But I just wanted to lay a marker that I think this is something that we should discuss on the dais more going forward. So, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, the chair would, Councilmember Sasson.
I feel a little bit baffled by why this is so challenging to articulate. I want to make very, very clear that the current Public Works arrangement is inadequate, and I am 150% committed to an appropriate facility. I think that there have been some interesting, compelling points raised, but I do not appreciate, and I may be shooting myself in the foot for saying this, I don't appreciate accusations of lying or manipulation. I find that to be unconvincing. I did not have a role on the council between 2018 and until just now in 2024, but I do think that as Public Works was conceived of in 2018 and brought in-house from Lake Forest Park at that scale, this firehouse building may well have been appropriate should it have been understood to be for sale, and should it have had the environmental feasibility work done. That is theoretical in my mind, because at this time in 2024, as we have grown as a city, as our residents have spoken up about their expectations of Public Works, as we have expanded the scope of Public Works in Kenmore, we have chosen a new site that will, at 2024 prices, that will allow for growth and expansion of scope for at least 30 years. So we're buying property to invest in the long term. Do I think it would be possible to shoehorn in what we have now at the little lot and in the little post office into the building that exists? I do. I think that's possible. Do I think that's ideal? No, I think future looking is important to me, and I feel convinced by this project. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Councilor Lutzis.
Yeah, Councilmember Culver brought up an interesting point, saying that this would directly impact the financial state of our city, or that we're in such an economic precarious state that this plays a huge role. Now, it's my understanding that capital projects like this are separate from our operating budget, from our street budget. Could you speak a little bit more about that, and how that intersection relates between capital projects and the current financial state of the city?
Sure. So the project is going to be funded with REIT, so real estate excise tax, and a combination of surface water facility or surface water utility tax. Neither of those are out of the operating budget. There will be impacts to the operating budget, as Rob mentioned previously, that there will be just the regular routine maintenance of a new facility will occur no matter what site we develop on. So those will be, impacting the general fund, but those are included in our forecast at this point in time.
But in terms of the actual acquisition of the property and the construction, that's not coming out of our operations budget, the other street budget that we have, and the other.
Not coming out of the general fund or the street fund.
General, that's right. And it will be funded by other income sources, revenue sources, separate from that.
Correct.
Now, with REIT, now does that have an earmark for capital projects, more or less, and is it restricted? So it's not that not going ahead with this project would free up those funds for other city services and operations?
It would not free up for operations. I think that, I don't know off the top of my head, there are a handful of things that could be spent on an operational level, but there's only a handful of things, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but for the most part, they're capital funds for capital projects.
Yeah, for the most part, real estate excise tax is restricted to capital projects only. There is a small exception in state law that allows a small portion of REIT to be spent on operations. But right now, you guys have real estate excise tax programmed in your capital budgets.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
I appreciate Councilmember Culver's bringing this up, and I think it's important to err, especially when we're looking at fiscal responsibility. Nothing wrong with looking at that in every instance or step along the way. But I think that the other values are environmental stewardship, especially where the city itself is proposing potentially an intensification, or hypothetically, not where the city is. The city is not proposing in this case, but if we were to be looking at public works in this fire station area, it'd be an intensification of use. I think the city ought to stay the course that many of our citizens have admonished us to stay, which is like, follow your own rules, try to uphold your own values. And that's part of that's environmental stewardship. I did fight for this precise Heron setback some years ago now on the city council. And I think it's important to uphold in the spirit and the letter. It's important to balance that against the fiscal. That's extremely important. But I think here that the environmental sways me, as well as look into those future needs. I may not even agree with all the financial needs, but I'm not the expert. I don't know to be telling the staff precisely what to do. I have suggestions, but overall, it seems that the recommendation is we've got a plan for future needs. I don't even, especially, you guys have heard me before, I have different ideas about how we deal with increased growth. And I don't particularly like the idea of increased growth, but inevitably, sure, to be responsible, I think we must plan for it. And that's part of having the recommendation on the existing recommendation for the public workshop.
Any further comments, questions? Councilor Culver.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple more things. The swim and the REIT money, that's $1.8 million a year, right? Over 20 years. And totally understood on that doesn't impact our general and street fund, which is one aspect of the fiscal and financial health of the city. But that is quite a significant impact on the debt that we have taken on. And in theory, I'm not saying I've ever seen anyone in City Hall with like a fish costume on that might have been advocating for salmon recovery or culvert replacement or anything like that, but those are funds that we could directly use towards salmon recovery and other capital projects, right? In the alternative scenario where we were able to potentially save 10 or 15 or $20 million.
Correct, but the operations for surface water maintenance and operations, those funds are going towards saving salmon, saving the habitat, saving the environment. That work that we do every day supports that.
Totally. Though on that same point as I made earlier about grants, we have also tapped into grant money for that as well, right? I know that ramping up this Rapid Progress Plus was like, more work to do. So it could free up more money to throw directly toward those efforts, right?
Can you answer that, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, everything has an opportunity cost. So
Yeah.
yes, it's just, remember, you got to maintain all that stuff once you build it.
100%.
Yeah.
Couple more pieces on the environmental stewardship and sensitivity in the Heron Rookery. We had some back and forth on this and some disagreements, I guess I'll say, but we've established that the 197-foot core zone for the Heron buffer, that's a fairly small piece of this property, right? It really only just nudges, I guess I direct this to staff, like that's a comparatively small overlap with the property, right?
The core zone.
The core zone, correct.
Yeah, there's two different buffers. There's the core
Right.
zone and then there's just the regular 650-foot buffer.
Right, and if we were to start using the 656-foot buffer as sort of we need to respect nature and not do anything there, we would really have to call into question other things happening in that neck of the woods, like the Sound Transit buses that run tens of thousands times per day through that access road on 181st, right?
What we would have to do is use the parking lot as a parking lot.
Okay, but, and I went and looked into this, but does it stand to reason that the buses go approximately 50 feet from the heron's nest? Does that seem roughly correct?
I don't think I could answer that question.
Sure. I see Samantha tagged in, yes.
Sure. So based on my conversation just today with Department of Fish and Wildlife about that area, what's important is to maintain base conditions, so existing conditions. That existing access road does see traffic currently,
Mhm.
and the parking lot is used as a parking lot. The concerns that were raised by Fish and Wildlife are if there are changes that would affect the heron, things like intensifying the use or expanding the building or construction within the parking lot, things like that could impact the heron rookery.
Totally. And digging into that a little further, I've got the folks reference at home, the management recommendations of Washington's priority habitats and species. On page 7, it says that it is most important because herons seem most sensitive to actions in their line of sight, things that they can see. So to keep any work that will increase the presence of people, domestic animals, and vehicles out of the view of their colony. So if that is the most important thing to protect is vehicles moving through, I just want to make sure that we're not sort of, selecting the environmental argument in certain instances and potentially discarding it in others. It seems frankly a little out of balance to me, just to be candid.
Based on my conversation today with Fish and Wildlife, that section refers to screening in projects that is used as a mitigation measure. And so when there are projects that could potentially be impacting heron as part of the heron, the habitat management plan, screening is often recommended. And so that's a benefit to the heron, but we didn't really discuss that on this property or project.
Sure, and we're talking about visual screening, right?
Yes.
So, and the property does have a tree line on the sort of inside of 181st, right? To screen so that the herons can't see into that parking lot. Is that correct? Surrounding that sort of swamp area, or not swamp, but ditch?
I'm not sure what the visibility is or how tall those trees are.
Okay, but the herons would probably have a much better view of the buses that are going 50 feet from it, right? That's unobstructed.
That are going through the access road currently?
Correct.
Yeah, they would have views of those buses.
A much better view, okay. Just want to make sure we are addressing environmental concerns. I guess last question. We spoke previously, and it sounds like y'all had an interest in this building some time ago. Is that right? Or when was that roughly?
This was brought up prior to, I guess it would have been during the fire district new building construction. So in the early to mid 10 teens.
Sure. Okay. Cool. That's all I got. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Okay, I have a few questions and I'm going to do them one at a time, and I may have responses. So just sharing, because sometimes I pause a little and often I'm not, I've had experiences where I haven't continued my questions to the place where I feel full understanding or that I've asked the details I was looking for. My first question is, why did the fire department move from its current location? And if you could provide that in some detail.
I don't have this information firsthand. It's my understanding that they moved because they couldn't expand the footprint of the building and couldn't expand their operations.
That's my understanding too, but you'd have to ask the fire district directly.
May I ask what that reason was? Why they couldn't expand? I'd like to hear that very clearly.
I had a conversation with prior legal counsel of the fire of that building, and they said they couldn't expand for environmental and other reasons.
Okay. So those environmental and other reasons, those would still hold true today if the city of Kenmore were to look at that property. Would that be true?
That would be true. And I believe the the restrictions or requirements are even more intense than they would have been at that time.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with what the standards were at that time, but we do have a larger buffer currently.
I appreciate that. And so we assume what year did we assume Public Works? If you could just, was it 2018 or 2019 that it came in-house? Just trying to remember the exact.
Yeah, sorry, didn't understand at first, but you were saying, what year did we take over Public Works in-house?
Mhm.
It was January 1 of 2019.
Okay. How many years have we been looking to put forth a public workshop that meets the needs of the city of Kenmore?
Since May of 2018, when the city of Lake Forest Park gave us notice that they would no longer be providing us services at the end of 2018.
Okay, so it's been 6 years, is that correct?
Yes.
How much staff time and work has gone into investigation and towards the creation of a public workshop? So we've had, my understanding is am I correct that there have been 2 properties that we've looked at so far?
There have been, well, there was two separate search criterias. The first one, actually the first property I think was actually before we even started the process, because there was a property that was for sale that we looked into. That was the Huck property up off of 202nd near the Blueberry Farm. Then the initial criteria process happened, and that's how we landed on the Chipetanapong property. And after that didn't go through, we revamped it with a council selected as a subcommittee to develop the criteria that we put this latest property through. So I don't know if I can really quantify how much time and effort has been put into this property search, but I can tell you that it's been significant, and not just on, myself, Rob, Richard, but a significant amount of other staff and consultant time. And so it's been a lot of work since we started in 2018.
And my understanding is that where we're at today, we're pursuing a very innovative, environmentally friendly design and construction that we have received grants for things such as geothermal energy. And we're getting support from really we're working towards bringing dollars from Washington, DC back to Kenmore to build this really mindfully designed public workshop. Is that correct? Millions of dollars that we're trying to bring back.
Yes,
Is that
there's
correct?
$2.4 million request on the Cantwell and Delbenny's list of projects. We've received $384,000 for a grant for geothermal. And I guess one of the biggest things that I'm most proud of is the fact that we are going to be saving hundreds of trees on the property that otherwise would have been clear cut for residential properties.
That's important. I think it's really significant that we look to the fact that in the past, since 2021, and as we've been moving on this, there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. I'm curious, if we were to stop this now and investigate a property investigate changing properties, how much time do you think it would take for us to get to a place of selecting, purchasing, creating design, and implementing a new space for public works?
Years.
And in that period of time, based on what we know for inflation, where we are at today, do you think that we would actually save money if it took us, say, 4 years to get to the place where we could dig from here? Do you think that we would actually save money if we started later?
I do not.
I think it's really important for us to understand that we have put a lot of care and consideration into the project selection that we made. It was hard. it was not ideal at the time. We made some very hard decisions. The expenses, it's an expensive project. I do want to be mindful of that we did put a lot of care into this, that the staff has worked very hard to get to where we are with this. It's not about the staff's work all alone. It's also, this is an environmental project. What we are talking about and considering the fire station, old fire station, which I think is what we're talking about. We can't even say if we were going to stop the project where we're at now and switch to the fire station, that the fire station would even meet criteria to do this today. And the cost of that may be even more than what we can even consider at this moment, because it would probably take 6 months to a year to even get it on the docket to actually look at, would be my guess. So sorry for conjecturing that, but I'm just throwing something out there, knowing how long I've been here, I mean, from my experience on council. I think it's very important that we be transparent and community knows the work that we put into this and the decision-making. I think it's important that Councilmember Culver pulled this from the agenda for us to have discussion. I also think that the environmental concerns at the fire station property are significant, and it's reasonable for us to, I just needed to mention the things that have been my concerns. And I think it's very important that we see that we are doing things that are getting noticed at the federal level. It's not often that we get considered from both senators for $2.4 million to fund something like this project. And I think that's something for us to recognize, that this work that we're doing here is very important and has a long-term vision for the people of Kenmore. So thank you.
Councilor Lucis.
Yeah, Councilmember Culver cited page 7 of this report, of which I read as well. And I think it's really important to look at the context of that section of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and about their recommendations. And I think it's important to note that a page earlier on page 6, when it talks about the recommended buffers for nesting colonies, the year-round buffers, in addition to seasonal buffers, year-round buffers, Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife say 656 in suburban rural areas. And even in just seasonal buffers, it still requires that 656 for unusually loud activities, which it describes as being is exceeding 92 decibels when the sound reaches the outer boundary of the nesting colony. Now, since this would be within 200 feet of that, I mean, just to put it into some context, you know, a hair dryer can reach up to 90 decibels. A leaf blower is 105. A chainsaw is 110. So when you're operating trucks and heavy equipment, as we are projecting to in this yard, it would pass those boundaries and those recommendations that the state has put forward for cities to follow. So I just think that that's an important piece of context too. It's not just about screening, it's also about noise, but in the grand scheme of things, there is this buffer that the state has put out.
Councilor Shubnik.
Yeah, just two thoughts. I appreciate you bringing this forward. We have had, Councilmember Culver, we have had citizens discuss this, so it's worth the discussion. Back when we talked about this, I think in 2018, after the first property that we considered didn't work out, we had that small subcommittee to try and figure out a defensible set of criteria, a stronger set of criteria that we could, you know, so to speak, hang our hats on comfortably. And then we went through a deliberate decision process. And at that time, this property did not meet the criteria for several reasons. You know, the fact that maybe some of the reasons that it didn't meet criteria back then have changed does not change the validity of the original decision. So that's one thought. But, you know, there's conditions on the ground often change after you make decisions, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you reconsider the whole decision. It can, but in this case, I don't think it's warranted because this property would not meet the needs that we have going forward. And then the other thought I have is that, you know, this is a property in our downtown area, and it is zoned downtown commercial. And frankly, I would like nothing more than to see the limited space that is developable there, which with the 656-foot buffer isn't much, but I would like to see what is developable there be developed in the way that the city and the residents have a vision for, which is for downtown commercial.
Councilmember Culver, and then we.
Thank you. A few things responding to Councilmember Lutzis's point about the buffers and the 90 decibel limits. I have a copy of that as well. I'm glad we were talking about this. I'm glad we were having this conversation. The footnote labeled F says that that would be for activities, as you said, exceeding 92 decibels when it reaches the outer boundary of the nesting colony. So that would be 197, a hairdryer 197 feet away. That's going to be considerably quieter when you're at the boundary itself, 197 feet away. Given that we've got numerous buses in the area, we're operating a whole park and ride, a whole transit system out of there, and the backwards beeps have not caused any great disturbance that we've been aware of. I think that is good to set some good expectations around. I am glad also we're going back in the timeline because looking back at before we went independent, before we had the breakup with Lake Forest Park, we actually did a public works analysis, right? To sort of suss out, how does this fit? Is this going to save us money? Is this a good idea? Is that right?
The purpose of the public works services analysis were to understand what services we were actually providing to the public.
Right, okay, 10-4. And I mean, just a couple notes on that quickly. We also passed some road standards, like in the surrounding year or so just before that, right?
2021 was the last road standards update.
I'm thinking like 2016 or so. So it probably was before that.
2016.
Okay, 10-4. I'll just note too, in terms of potential spending, members of the community have also brought up, it was recommended against when we became a city. They said, the city cannot afford to do public works in-house, right? This was, I haven't seen it, but I've heard it cited a number of times, and it sounds like this was an independent study sort of offered by King County. Have you all seen that, or is that anything that you could speak to?
Are you talking about the incorporation study from
Correct.
1998?
Yeah.
I think I've seen it, the exterior of it. I don't know if I've actually read it.
Sure, okay, 10-4. A few other things on staff and work time that we were throwing at it. With apologies for putting Chuck on the spot a little bit, but the job description did entail a lot of language about having difficult conversations and looking for some accountability and getting some performance, I think, out of vendors and stuff like that. Does that ring a bell to you all?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I couldn't understand what you first said.
Yeah, sorry, I wandered off there. The job description for the project manager that we hired to help oversee this new facility, a lot of the language was around having difficult conversations and timelines and deliverables and sticking to budgets and stuff like that, right? Getting some sort of toothier oversight in the process. Right. Okay, and I do want to respond briefly to bringing back $2.4 million in grants, which is roughly 10% of the $22.5 million budget overall. The last thing I would just say briefly on the defensible set of criteria, yeah, y'all put together the Councilmember Shebnick and Deputy Mayor O'Kane and Councilmember I'm spacing Milton Curtis before us. Y'all put together a solid set of criteria, but several of the things, some at the time, and I think some also since, have don't stand up the way that they used to at the same time. So I would just, as a word of caution, say some cost fallacy. I mean, when you know better, you do better. There is a cost associated with potentially changing, but I don't think there's a huge cost to just evaluating it, to just giving it a look. And potentially if it could save us something like $20 million, that's a bunch of tenant improvements. So I think at a minimum, again, I think it warrants more discussion, but I have exhausted my question, so I will stop. Thank you.
All right, I've been fairly liberal around allowing folks to speak off the topic of the question actually at hand, which is the contract, because I understand we need to have a large discussion, but Are there any further comments on the actual contract on item D? Everybody's already had a chance to. Okay, I'm not seeing any. The chair would entertain a motion to authorize the city manager to execute contract number 24-C3061 with Wagner Architects and Planners for the final design of the Public Works Operations Center in a sum not to exceed $2,035,500.
Mr. Chair, I would like to motion to table this decision for no more than 30 days.
Okay, we have a motion to table is not exactly the right word. What is it? Sorry. Says delay until time. I don't think tables comes back same meeting. Sorry, I'm getting into the weeds on Roberts, but
Shout out Jurassic Parliament.
well, right, there is no motion yet, actually, so there's nothing to table yet, but
I so move. Now there's a motion.
all right, I'll second. Councilmember Culver, you want to make a motion to, what is what I'm looking for? Sorry, I'm just trying to go through my list here. Postpone to a time certain in the next 30 days?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to get the language correct because
Thank you.
table's not the right language there. Councilmember Culver has a motion to postpone to a time certain in the next 30 days. Is there a second? Motion dies due to lack of second. We have the main motion in front of us. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
I will. Will you kindly confirm who moved and who seconded the motion?
Councilor Shrubnik moved the motion. I seconded.
On the motion to authorize the city manager to execute contract number 24-C3061 with Wagner Architects and Planners for the final design of the Public Works Operations Center in a sum not to exceed $2,035,500. Councilmember Sassen.
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis.
Yes.
Councilmember Culver.
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 votes in favor, the motion carries.
All right, next on the agenda, we have 3 public hearings. First one is proposed ordinance number 24-0607, amending Kenmore Municipal Code, Title 5, Title 16, and Title 18 to replace the word marijuana with cannabis, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk and Planner Riley Rossbotham for a public hearing.
Okay, so good evening, council. This evening, we have 2 ordinances before you that are part of the Development Services 2024 work plan. Both of them are code cleanup items, but because they're in Title 18 zoning, they do require a public hearing. And Riley Rossbotham, our planner, will explain each of those.
Thank you. The first one, ordinance number 24-0607, is to amend Title 5, Title 16, and Title 18 of the KMC to replace the word marijuana with cannabis. And this is in response to a 2022 Washington State bill replacing the term marijuana with cannabis throughout the RCW. Cannabis is more commonly used in scientific settings, and basically this code amendment, there's no substantive changes. It's just to replace the word to be in alignment with state code. And then the second.
Before we move on to the second one, sorry, we're going to take this one at a time because we need to open it for public hearing. So is that all on the first?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you have any questions for staff before we open up the public hearing? All right, I'm not seeing any hands going up. So I'm going to declare the public hearing. Well, okay. For the public hearing, folks will be granted 3 minutes to speak. The same public comment rules apply, including stating your name and city of residence and addressing your comments directly to the city council. If your comments have been fully expressed by preceding speakers, we encourage you to summarize your statements by stating your name, city of residence, and saying I agree with the previous speaker. We'll hear testimony from our on-site guests first, followed by our pre-registered virtual guests. I want to thank folks for taking the time. I declare the public hearing open. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for this public hearing?
We have no one signed up to speak.
Is there anybody who wishes to be heard? Anybody else who wishes to be heard? Anyone who wishes to be heard? All right. I am now declaring public hearing closed. That brings us to item B, proposed ordinance number 24-0608, amending the Kenmore Municipal Code, chapter 18.20 to update the definitions of family and adult family home, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Luke and Planner Riley Rossbotham.
Yeah, so this one amends two definitions in chapter 18.20 of the KMC. The first one is to amend the definition of family. Currently in the definition of family, there is a section saying a group of residents unrelated by blood or marriage of 8 or fewer. And this would remove the 8 or fewer provision from that. And again, that's in response to a Washington state bill requiring municipalities to remove limits on the number of unrelated residents to be included in the definition of family. And then the second part is to amend the definition of adult family home. Currently, the definition allows up to 6 residents of an adult family home who are not related to the persons in charge of managing the adult family home. And Washington State in 2020 added a provision allowing up to 8 residents in an adult family home, provided that they meet certain criteria, including financial solvency, management experience, and things like traffic mitigation. So essentially, this code change is to add a sentence to our definition of adult family home, allowing up to 8 residents as long as it meets the criteria of the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services.
All right, do we have any questions for staff before we open up the public hearing? All right, I declare the public hearing open. Same rules apply. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for this public hearing?
We have one person wishing to speak, Patrick O'Brien.
All right.
Patrick O'Brien, Kenmore, Washington. It's very interesting that this would come to light, that you're going to change the definition of family. We've seen a lot of messaging, which I would call virtue signaling, go on in this city. And it seems to continue. It's virtue signaling is when you call out and say, aren't we great? We got our vaccine. Oh, isn't it great? We got this, we got that. So, and if you don't, then you're the bad guys. And it seems like every kind of change you make in the code, and it is difficult to describe other than the need to virtue signal that it could be, you know, a family could be 2 dogs and a cat. I mean, whatever you could imagine, it could be. But I know the family I grew up in may not be the same as yours, but I don't see the need for this body to change the code to accommodate things that I think are basically your statement on saying, hey, we're a liberal city. We'll change the meaning of everything. And I just think it's funny. It's funny. And the people on the outside looking in that are more traditional are going, what are these people doing? They spend money, they virtue signal, they hire a lot of people. The artwork is questionable. So what are we really paying for? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We have no additional people wishing to speak.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Ms. Mooney, would you like to, and then just make sure that you sign up with the clerk.
Elizabeth Mooney, hi. I just will say that I'm here, but I didn't come to this particular hearing on purpose. I have no idea why you're trying to change the definitions. The only reason that I'm mentioning this in the public hearing is to say that maybe there is a reason to learn more because I'm ignorant. And if it makes a big difference in what we will be building in the future, that I also have not attended the new housing. I have no idea. I am ignorant. I'm sorry. But you only have 2 people here. And that's not a community. And sometimes in the past, and I will say that the city made some decisions that I didn't understand that had to do with pollutants and heavy industry. And that was a word called manufacturing. That made a lot of difference. And I wish I'd learned more. So if this has a big impact for families that might want to understand something very complicated that the city is planning in the future that I am ignorant about, then I would be concerned. So anyway, always, I'm always for people learning more before you make major decisions that might impact budget. Something like missing middle, I have no idea. I'm sorry. The only reason I'm saying something is because Patrick O'Brien said something, and I appreciate that citizens are speaking to you guys because there should be more people at our council meetings. Anyway, thank you.
Is there anybody wishing to be heard? All right, with that, I'm declaring this public hearing closed, and we'll move on to the final public hearing, and then we'll circle back to all these in our business agenda. Third item for public hearing, proposed resolution number 24-413, 2025-2030 6-year transportation improvement program, presented by Engineering Director John Vicente. Do we need to take a quick break?
Yeah, he was here just a second ago.
All right, why don't we just take a quick 2-minute stretch? We'll be back. You good? All right, the Kenmore City Council will return to order. Mr. Vicente, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Council. Tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about the Transportation Improvement Plan for 2025 to 2030. So tonight, I'm going to review the plan with you. I'm going to go over the new projects that are being added. I will give you a summary of our 2023 improvements. There will be a public hearing on this item and then a recommendation to hopefully adopt the resolution 2414 and the TIP. Just a little background, the TIP is required by state law for us to update every year. It's due July 1 of each year. The TIP must show the city's proposed utilization of funds for transportation related projects in the upcoming 6 years. It needs to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. This TIP does align with our complete streets policy, and it is a planning document, so it's not fiscally restrained. A public hearing is required for approval. Once approved, it has to be filed with the Secretary of State or Secretary of Transportation. And for your information, the local funds shown in the TIP are based off of what's approved in the current CIP. So within this TIP, we've got 14 projects from the 2024-2029 that we carried over. First, we've got the Burke-Gilman Accessibility Trail. It used to be called the SR 522 West B, but given the nature of the project, we decided to change the name to better reflect what we're doing. Then we've got the ADA Transition Program and the Pavement Preservation Program. Both of those are citywide, and depending upon where we find the need is where we implement the project. Then we've got the 61st Avenue Sidewalk Replacement Phase 1. We've got the 80th Avenue Northeast Ped Bike Project from 522 to 185th. Then we've got the Northeast 181st Street Sidewalk Project from 61st to 63rd. This is on the south side of the street. Then there's the Lower Swamp Creek Bridge Replacement at 175th at 520 and 80th Avenue. Then we have the Northeast Arrowhead Drive Sidewalk from 151st to 64th. That is along the west side of the street and south side of Arrowhead. Then we got 73rd Avenue sidewalks from 182nd to the city limits. The previous TIP, I stopped it at 201st, but I figured let's just take it to the city limits. And that's on the east side of the street. Then the Northeast 192nd Street sidewalk from 73rd to 75th. That's on the north side of the street. Then we've got 84th Avenue Northeast Ped Bike Project from 150th to 155th. That's sidewalks, bike lanes on both sides of the street. And then we've got 84th Avenue Northeast sidewalk from 155th to Simons. Right now, the proposal is sidewalk on the west side, bike lanes on both sides. And then we have Northeast 155th Street sidewalk from 84th to 87th. That is sidewalks on both sides to complete the sidewalk run from 84th to Simons Road. And then we've got the Northeast 192nd Street Ped Bike Project from 73rd to 80th. That's predominantly on the south side of the road, but also would include the remaining sidewalk on the north side over by 80th Avenue. There were some projects completed removed. The Northeast 170th Street sidewalk is coming off because we're constructing it right now and it should be done before the end of the summer. And then the Simons Road sidewalk from 155th to 88th, I took that off. I've applied for grants a couple times and it just scores so low on their reporting that I just don't feel confident that we could get funds for it. So I pulled it off because I don't expect to get funds in the next 6 years on that one. Whereas the other projects in there, I have a lot more confidence that we could potentially get funding for those. So we did add some new projects. We added the 80th Avenue Corridor Project, which is from 185th to the city limits. I actually incorporated several of our projects in our pedestrian facilities plan within this one program so that if I want to apply for small segments, it's still within the TIP and I can go ahead and do that. Then we have the North 175th Street Sidewalk Ped Bike Project. That would be closing the gap between 68th and 73rd on the south side and then putting bike lanes on both sides to connect eastward to the Burke-Gilman Trail. Then there's the 155th Street Ped Bike from 81st to 84th. This would be on the south side of the street. And then Northeast 181st Street sidewalk from 62nd to 65th, and then the 61st Avenue sidewalk replacement Phase 2 project. What I'm going to do is just briefly go through each one of these new projects. So we're going to be having sidewalk on both sides of the street for the entire project length. We will have a separated bike lane on both sides. We'll be looking at intersection treatments at all the intersections, which would be all different types of traffic calming and other safety elements to get vehicles across and onto the street. We'll be looking at adding several crossing treatments to provide easier access through and about. You'll love this one. Culvert replacement, got to make it fun, at 195th. And then the stream currently runs next to the street, and we're looking to push it over if we possibly can, as much as possible, to create more of a buffer. Then we have the 175th Street sidewalk bicycle project, 68th, 63rd. So sidewalk on the south side, closing the gap, bike lanes on both sides, and we will be retaining the on-street parking where it currently exists. Then 155th Street sidewalk on the south side, with a separated bike lane on the south side and an in-street bike lane on the north side. And then 181st, we would be doing sidewalk on the south side from 63rd to 65th, and then sidewalk on the north side from 62nd all the way to 65th. We would be retaining on-street parking where possible. There are some topography issues there, so it may not be possible to have on-street parking, and also proposing utility undergrounding if we can get the funding for it. This project would qualify for federal funds, and they will pay for undergrounding. So we'll make an attempt to do that, but there's no guarantees. And then there's the 61st Avenue sidewalk relocation. So first we've got on the west side from 193rd to 60th, that would be doing the sidewalk repair. And this assumes that we don't get any additional funding for the Phase 1 project that we are working on this year. And then on the east side of the street from 182nd to 190th, we would be taking the sidewalk that is going along the east side, and we would be relocating it slightly to the west into the existing travel lane. We would take the center turn lane and remove that and put the northbound lane in that location. We would provide an enhanced crossing at the 60th intersection to get pedestrians over to the sidewalk. And then we would be looking at some stream channel improvements along this corridor as much as we possibly can with the funding that we have. And then summary of our improvements. Within our complete streets policy, I need to identify and share with council what we've done each year. And in 2023, we built 1,230 linear feet of new sidewalks. So it doesn't count all the repairs we've made. This is just brand new sidewalk. And then 9,410 feet of new bike lanes. That's each direction. And we did 2 enhanced street crossings, so flashing crossings. With that, I leave it up to council for discussion and the public hearing.
Any questions or comments before we open up the public hearing? Councilmember Culver, Shrevenick, and then Lutzis.
Yeah, this is great. And my question is a tiny non sequitur, but on slide 7, there's a little carve out where there's a straight eastern line, I guess, on the sort of eastern side of the city that just cuts in a little bit. Is there an interesting story there, or that just is the way it is?
So I'm really not certain about the carve outs with how it happened during incorporation, but I don't know how the city became how it looks today. A lot of times it has to do with existing surrounding boundaries, and it's just what's left.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, I think you solved our problem about where's the fun. It was on the fish slide. Okay, so 3 just comments, and I don't know whether they belong here or later, but this is great. Always a very clear presentation. Thank you for that. Quick question. At one point in the past, we had something called a local road safety plan. And we also have a pedestrian facilities plan. And of course, the CIP has a specific projects that align with those. But are those 2 plans, they're not the same, or are they the same? I guess, can you describe the difference?
Yeah, so they're not the same. So the pedestrian facilities plan identifies where we want to put sidewalk or other pedestrian facilities within the city. So if we want to put in walkways, trails, sidewalks, that plan says this is where we're going to prioritize where we're going to place them, where we want to focus our dollars that we have, or where we want to go for grant money. The local road safety plan looks at the general safety of our roads and what improvements can we make to improve those roads, which might include sidewalks, but it includes other things, traffic calming, lighting, striping, whatever we might need.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. And in the future, not today, but maybe between now and the next time this comes before us, I mean, we're doing doing amazing things with getting monies to make these improvements. And I would love to see a visual I'm just having in my mind's eye, you know, and maybe it's like this living thing where, you know, each year you color where we've made an improvement and you see over the time, you know, like a time lapse, you know, you see over time what we're doing and where these projects fall in terms of filling gaps. That's where I want to get to, is two things. One, the visual of that. And then the other is each time this comes before us, maybe representing the criteria for getting on the list. Because we did at some point in the past develop a pretty clear set of criteria. So I'd love to just refresh everybody's memory each time we bring this. Thank you so much.
Councilor Lutzis.
Going back to the slide about projects removed or completed really quickly. I know that you said that the Northeast 170th Street project, that's currently being worked on, which makes sense to pull that off. The other one though, that I had a comment on is the Simons Road project. That one between, I think you said 155th or is it 152nd and 88th?
151st to 88th.
151st and 88th. And for me, I don't know if I'm quite ready to pull that off. I understand that, you know, it's not scoring highly, but I personally don't feel that it's best to give up just yet and to keep that on our radar and maybe we can find some funding. I know I talked to you about this outside of this. Just considering the fact that it's within a school zone or right adjacent to a school zone, it's on a street that has houses, residential houses along it, and just the very busy nature of Simons. I think it is certainly an important thing to keep on our radar. I understand, you know, like you said, it's scoring lowly, but you know, just keeping that up there and maybe we can find something. I'm not sure what some of the other council feels about that sort of project and sidewalks and sort of that transportation improvement in that school zone area around Inglemore. I just know it's desperately needed. And I know that I've seen students still walking on the non-sidewalk side of the road. And, you know, I'm sure that there's some improvement that can be made there.
Councilor Marshall.
Yes, because of the school zone, I feel the same as Councilmember Lucas on that point.
Any further comments before we open up the public hearing? Deputy Mayor?
I would just say I agree that being a school zone makes it incredibly important.
Any further comments before the public hearing gets opened? All right, I am declaring the public hearing open. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for this public hearing?
We do, thank you. We have one member on site wishing to speak, Patrick O'Brien, followed by Stacy Valenzuela online.
All right.
Pat O'Brien, Kenmore. I had a conversation with the engineer about a month ago, as you recall, and he said to put a sidewalk across the street from my house on 181st Street would be $7 to $10 million, and it'd probably be more than 10 years before they could fund that. Is that correct? That's what I recall. So that's very interesting that it went from where it presently is to go, which Sound Transit, out of the goodness of their heart, gave the city $1.5 million to help the city of Kenmore out of the goodness of their heart. Gee, I wonder what sort of warm feeling Sound Transit has for us. If one only knew. Is it true that Sound Transit is going to help us with additional parking? And isn't it true that our downtown is so congested with parking, people wanting parking, that we're going to have some additional parking?
Mr. O'Brien, I would ask you to address your comments to the council and the mayor.
All right. If you care. All right. So it's true that we're running out of parking. I reclaim my time, by the way. And the funny thing is, Sound Transit is going to do us a big favor and build a 5-story parking garage on the land for the old fire station. Won't that be great? And those herons will only have to fly over a 5-story building. What great news. And we'll have, I hope we have some preferential treatment towards Kenmore parking. So that's kind of odd. Would that building, you think, interfere with the heron's flight pattern down to Lake Washington or the slough? Gee, I don't know. So it looks like a lot of this sidewalk and improvements is done with very little input or even honesty with the people who own property in front and around these. And I've seen it on the lower part of 181st where 2 Vietnamese guys, they had their front yard taken and no discussion with them. I've talked to them and they put parallel parking basically in their front yard and they redirected the sidewalk around the big tree and then put parking in there. So, you know, sometimes this city and across the street where ex-Mayor Caldwell's practices, they didn't do anything to improve the sidewalk there. And the sidewalk is like that. Maybe he has some political influence that didn't get addressed. I don't know. It's just a question.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mayor Herbick, we did have an additional on-site comment, a request to comment by Elizabeth Mooney.
Okay, Ms. Mooney.
Hi, thank you. Elizabeth Mooney, Kenmore. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Vicente for the meetings that he's had, thanks to our other citizen, Jim Howard, inviting me. And so I'm really particularly interested in the 61st Avenue projects and trying to figure out if there's a way to work with our volunteer efforts to bring more people in that live, like, I think Deputy Mayor O'Kane lives in that area, and Councilmember Marshall, and just also some of the people that I've met on Chitchathel or 0056, and the people who walk, I mean, just being there in front of the property that the city bought there. We are so excited about that. And so if there's something, maybe we can talk about it at Farmers Market, you know, like whether there's something that we can do to drum up energy and maybe even look into grants that would complement what the city's doing. I know Jim Howard talked about how great the 68th Street renovations were and how it slows down traffic. And when our city manager talked about the kind of complications when we were over at Kenmore Community Building and how it's really slowed down traffic. It's lovely. It didn't. So if there's something that we can do with roundabouts, I don't know. I mean, I know you're the expert, Mr. Vicente, but if there's something that we can do to think outside the box, make it safer, slow down the traffic, it's really loud. We met some of the people who live right across the street from that piece of property, and I've got their numbers, so I'm happy to help bring some of the stakeholders in and maybe look for more money. I don't know, and ideas. But thank you, Mr. Vicente, for including us in these complicated projects. And we're super excited that it'll, from 190th down to the lake, that we can maybe help bring in more money for safety and fish coming back into the streams. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore. A few of these new 6-year transportation plan directives fail to even consider our residents' needs, concerns, or safety. Let me offer some tips. Northeast 175th Street, I feel sidewalk, pedestrian, bike access is not needed. The area has a walking, biking trail within 20 to 30 feet, and it's away from traffic already. It's called the Burke-Gilman Trail. Why waste millions on unneeded sidewalks that could be spent on additional pedestrian and bike trails where they're needed? Because no alternative is right there causing danger, or in other areas like affordable housing, your priority. We just need signs directing residents or non-residents to the trail, which would decrease the cost substantially. If continually past arrows on pavement or at eye level, straight going past 68, or if they're turning to head up north or south on 68. Wasn't the Burke-Gilman Trail provided for their safety? Northeast 181st is not wide enough at all for sidewalk on both sides, and just half a block away is 522 with sidewalk. I think it needs only one side of sidewalk on 181st. The push to make vehicle drivers uncomfortable with barely enough space is a huge danger and very unsafe. We are seeing a lot more accidents weekly in Kenmore. I think residents came forward with the concerns that rather than restrict road width for everyone, or in the corner bulbs that stick out in traffic, or even making oncoming traffic cross over into the opposite lanes when the majority of drivers were already driving safer, it may be a bigger benefit for all if the needed causes of the restrictions, the street drag racers, the speeders, those that cause accidents, the young kids that carjack, never even passing licensing exams, are held accountable. Why don't we work on that? Citing with larger fines, confiscation of cars. Why are we even not holding these, causing these problems responsible? Why do we endanger all drivers when it's a minority not following the speed, watching for pedestrian and bicyclists? The use of open space for the rain garden plantings and roundabouts could also improve conditions drastically. Please, reviews before you adopt these plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Mayor Herbeck, that concludes our list.
Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? Anyone else wishing to be heard? Is there anybody else wishing to be heard? All right, I declare the public hearing closed. That brings us to our business agenda. First item is proposed ordinance number 24-0607, amending Kenmore Municipal Code, Title 5, Title 16, and Title 18 to replace the word marijuana with cannabis, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk and Planner Riley Rossbotham for adoption. Is there any further discussion or questions on this ordinance? Deputy Mayor.
I just need to move back to that real quick. Yeah, I think it's important when we change words that our community, our residents understand why. So I'm curious, why did the state change the word marijuana to cannabis? I think it's really important for us to understand what that is.
Yeah, I think there are a couple reasons. I think one of the initial motivations was that there was some concern that the word marijuana was a racist word and that it had been used to demonize Mexicans and Mexican immigrants by the US federal government. And there is some evidence to that, although there's a little bit of debate about that, but I think that was one of the reasons why Washington State decided to change that. And then I think the other reason was to bring it into more alignment with the scientific community and to have more clarity around just being consistent with words that are used by the scientific community to define that substance.
I really appreciate that. And I'm just gonna say this out loud. I didn't know about the racist history of the word marijuana until I think about a year ago when I attended an event. And I used the word at a cannabis shop because it was their ribbon cutting, and I learned about that. So I think it's really important for people to understand that the reason at least to our knowledge, a part of that root is in the racist history of the word. I also do agree, is there real evidence of that? I don't know. But the two words, I mean, I heard the story and it was something that I understood. I'm just going to say this out loud at this point, okay? I read 1984 in 2017, and I was reminded of a term called newspeak. And there's a concern that I think many people in our country have about the changing definitions of words. And I think that we as a body need to be mindful of language as we make these decisions. I recognize the history of that word, and I think it's important to go ahead. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand that, but I'm just going to call out what I kind of heard some concerns from our community that spoke today about the use of language. We are living in very unusual times, and I take language very seriously. So what was really an easy decision earlier, I started thinking about a little bit more consequentially. So I think it's very important for community to come out and speak and ask questions. I think that the reason for the word change makes sense at the state level. My second question would be, if we were not to change that word, would that be any impact for our ability to use that word in our codes? I mean, yeah, would it make a difference?
I think it might lead to a little bit of confusion when just interpreting our codes and then cross-referencing with state code. So I think that would be the main impact of not changing the word.
Yeah, kind of at the root of newspeak is simplifying language and narrowing speech so that there are fewer terms to be used to communicate information. So I just wanted to bring that up. I really appreciate you answering this. Thank you.
Any further comments? Okay, seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve proposed ordinance number 24-0607.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion, second from Councilmember Marshall. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt ordinance number 24-0607 to amend Title V, Title 16, and Title 18 of the Kenmore Municipal Code to replace the word marijuana with cannabis. Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik. Yes. Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
7 votes in favor, the motion passes.
All right, next on the agenda is proposed ordinance number 24-0608, amending Kenmore Municipal Code, Chapter 18, .20 to update the definitions of family and adult family home, presented by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk and Planner Riley Rossbotham. Anything additional from staff on this? No? Okay, do we have any additional questions? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. It's to align our code with state law, which has been changed to allow for up to or maybe more than 8 people in an adult family home. Is that right?
It's
Close.
to allow up to 8 people in adult family homes given certain criteria. And then for the family, it's to allow potentially greater than 8, a group of 8 people who are unrelated by blood or marriage to live within a single dwelling unit.
Okay, an adult family home can also include those that are licensed by the state?
Yes, it's a term that's defined by the state, and it means a residential home where people provide personal care, special care, room and board. So it's like a care facility.
It could be for behavioral health disorders or people who need assistance in taking medications.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, great. And that's just as a very brief comment, that's something that helps out clients I represent every day, is where are people coming from when we get them stabilized and they're out of the facilities. Very often they go to adult family homes, and that's their success.
Any other comments? Deputy Mayor?
And just to dial back in on this, again, we're talking about language, which I think is important. The change in the word is to expand access, is that correct? To services, whether it's to expand the number of people for the word family, just the family, to live in a housing unit. It's like it's a protective thing it's actually ultimately a benefit. Okay, it's very hard for me to understand. I understand where Elizabeth Mooney came from. Why are we changing the word family? I don't think we're changing it, but we're actually creating more accessibility by expanding it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had kind of been thinking about how to conceptualize it. And with the definition of family, I guess the way I think about it is, so you have a house with 9 bedrooms, and you have a group of 8 people who are unrelated by blood or marriage. Under the current code, those 8 people are allowed to live in that house. But if you add a 9th person, then it's not allowed by code. So this would remove that limit of 8. So say you have that house of 9 bedrooms and 9 people who are unrelated who call themselves a family, they can still live in that house. So it essentially removes an unnecessary limitation on the number of people who can live together.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me. It's almost like, why does it have to be a family home? Why not just a home, right? And defining the group of people by that term family, I think is that's necessary to do that is an interesting linguistic sort of thing in my mind. But I think it's important to create access to housing. So I understand what it's about, but I just wanted to have some discussion around this so I can dial in a little bit more closely on something that seemed very routine, as I said earlier. We do really need to think about it when we're changing definitions of things. Thank you.
Councilor Lucis.
That actually covered my point pretty significantly, although I was just going to add on to that. It seems like that 8 is fairly arbitrary. Is that correct? Was there any reason for imposing that limit of 8 before?
Not that I know of. I know there are other limits on residential capacity just based on health and safety.
Yes.
But that 8 is not based on those, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I had the same thought as you, 8 is a family, but 9 is suddenly not. And so I think this doesn't change the definition at all, but it just strikes that arbitrary element.
Councilor Sassen.
My question is that this phrase 8 or fewer that's highlighted on line 4 is also repeated at the end of line 5. And I'm just wondering what I'm missing. It says 8 or fewer or a group living arrangement. Maybe that's because that's a clinical arrangement.
Yeah, so I believe that's actually referring to the adult family home.
That's
or something
similar.
Yeah.
Okay, so they are differentiated, those two things.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I appreciate the clerk. I requested that she put this up because of the comments that we heard during the public hearing. I just wanted to really make sure the public could see exactly what changes we are discussing here, which, as you can see, are fairly minimal and clerical. And you can see that we are not changing the definition of family in any sort of meaningful way. We're changing it to allow more than 8 unrelated folks to live in a house and up to 8 people in an adult family home is licensed by the state, which is in line with the RCW, which allows for 7 or 8 bed adult family homes. This is a pretty straightforward change. I just wanted to make sure the public had a chance to look at the attachment that was in the agenda. Because of the questions that came up during our public hearing. Any further discussion on this? Councilor Lucis?
Just going off of Councilmember Sassen's point about that 8 or fewer in that second element, is there a reason why that one is retained? I'm looking at the example of, say, foster care, and that imposes, say, a limit on the number of, people, foster children that a parent might be able to house.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I believe that's also coming from a state requirement, but I would have to check that.
So the 8 is a state requirement to keep in that section, but remove from the other?
I'd have to check to make sure, but.
Yes,
So all of the language that's used here is
Mhm.
from the RCW, exactly. And so we're just updating it as a code cleanup to be consistent.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt proposed ordinance number 24-0608.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to adopt ordinance number 24-0608 to amend chapter 18.20 of the Kenmore Municipal Code to update the definition of family and adult family home. Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
7 votes in favor, the ordinance passes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is proposed resolution number 24-413, the 2025-2030 6-year transportation improvement program presented by Engineering Director John Vicente. Anything further to add?
The only thing I would add is it sounds like there's some interest from council to retain the Simons sidewalk. If that's the case, then I would need a modified motion to add that in as part of your approval.
Any further discussion or questions before we move on to a motion? Councilmember Lucis.
Just a clarification on that. So when it comes to this, would the standard motion be made and then the amendment?
Yeah, you can't amend something that hasn't been moved.
Of
So
course, I just
yes.
want to confirm. Thank you.
It's okay. Any further questions or comments on the transportation improvement? Okay, not seeing any. Chair will entertain a motion to approve proposed resolution number 24-413.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second from Councilmember Culver. Any discussion?
I move that we,
Councilmember Lutsis.
excuse me, I move to amend the motion to include within the transportation improvement plan, the retention of the Simons Road sidewalk project.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll on the amendment?
On the amendment to include within the transportation improvement plan, the Simons Road project. Councilmember O'Kane, Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
7 votes in favor, the amendment passes.
That brings us back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll on the amended main motion?
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Lutsis,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Culver,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Sassen,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
7 votes in favor, the resolution is adopted as amended.
Thank you very much. Next up, staff report. Update on the schedule for Imagine Housing, presented by Community Development Director Debbie Bent and Housing and Human Services Manager Tamby Cork.
Good evening, Council. This is just a brief status update on the Imagine Housing project. There's no action, but we're here if you have any questions. So in December last year, Council approved the selection of the affordable housing proposal submitted by Imagine Housing and Habitat for Humanity for the city-owned property at 7010 Northeast 181st Street, and also for staff to continue to work on the proposal. So since December, Imagine has been conducting their due diligence on the site, an analysis of the site, and has been meeting with staff regularly. They have been working on a code compliant proposal. A code compliant proposal means that it would not require a development agreement. And the main issue around code compliance was height. Height on that property is 65 feet. So in order to meet that requirement meant some modification, essentially removing a floor to meet that height requirement. And by doing so, that meant that the total project units would be now around 121. When the proposal was submitted, and when you submit a proposal, it's very conceptual at that request for proposal stage. So it would reduce from 153 to 121. That's the anticipated reduction. It is still a significant affordable housing project. Another change was the size of the commercial space, and the proposal that you saw in December was around 7,000 square feet, and they're now anticipating that to be between 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. Providing a commercial space for a community partner is not a code requirement. It was something that was a desire of the city, and they are still working on meeting that desire. They are working with HopeLink and hope to have HopeLink as a partner in that space. That has not yet been confirmed. If HopeLink is not a partner, they will then look for additional partners. So that is still a question to be answered. They anticipate being able to meet the parking requirement because the code does allow a 50% reduction in parking for an affordable housing project. So they're anticipating around 129 stalls. The exterior design that you saw last December will probably be very similar to the actual proposal. So in terms of the Imagine Housing piece, it would be a 6-story units with 103 units with 105 parking spaces. The unit mix will vary from studios to a 3 bedrooms. They would be affordable to 50% AMI to 60% AMI. So a split between 51 units at 50% and 52 units at 60%. And essentially, that the only difference really between that and a typical rental apartment project is you have to qualify with income to be in there. That's really the only difference. Other than that, it would be like a typical apartment building. The Habitat for Humanity, that would be affordable ownership units. That has not changed. There would still be 18 units affordable to 80% of AMI. So again, that is slightly, it's an ownership unit. It's a very different project than the Plymouth Housing Project. It is more like a typical apartment project. So where we are right now with the project, they are hoping to meet with the Development Services Department in July for a pre-application meeting. Upon completion of that meeting, we will then know for sure if the proposal they have submitted is code compliant. If it is, that would then outline that permit process, which would be an administrative permit process, which would then run through the typical public notice comment process. Imagine are anticipating a community engagement process, probably starting around the same time as the pre-application meeting, to kind of tell the community what is the project in terms of what the building looks like and what the tenants will look like. Again, it'd be kind of typical tenants that you would see in any apartment complex. So assuming it is a code compliant project, council action then would be authorization of a purchase and sale agreement. And they would need that purchase and sale agreement in hand before they go out to the funders for funding, so that there is some assurance that they will be able to gain control of that building. In terms of the funding process, when they did submit the proposal last December, there was a funding gap, and we are still working with them to figure out how they propose to close that funding gap and how many rounds of funding they will need to fund the project. So again, that timing then will then dictate when the property is sold, before they can kind of begin renting up those projects. So the timing, we're still waiting on that. So the update tonight is basically to say that we are continuing to work with Imagine Housing and Habitat for Humanity to bring this affordable housing project to the city. There is still some unknowns there, but we are still working through that. So, and we're here, Tammy and I are here to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions, Councilmember Marshall?
So it's got to be presumed there are going to be school-age children living there, is that right?
There could be, say, the unit mixes between studios to 3-bedroom. So yes, there could be families there.
Councilmember Lucis?
Yeah, quick question. So that purchase and sale agreement, that would come, that would allow them to help secure funding. That's correct?
That's correct.
And now just a clarification on that. So if, what happens if they don't secure the funding? I'm not saying that they won't. I imagine that they will. I'm just kind of curious.
Well, that would be likely one of the conditions on the purchase and sale agreement, that they would secure funding before the property is transferred.
That answers my third follow-up question, was that there'd be some sort of contingency where if they don't secure the funding in order to complete this project, that, you know, we don't lose the property. So right on. Thank you.
Councilmember Culver?
Thank you. This is exciting. Love it. I may have missed it in there. It sounds like we are expecting that they're going to submit a project that is code compliant and wouldn't need to go through the development agreement process. Do you have any ballpark guesses on what it might be like if they don't do that? Like what the odds of that might be? Or is it fully expected at this point that they're gonna?
They are working hard to bring a code compliant project forward, which is what we would do with any project in the city, is we work with a project to be code compliant.
Sure. Okay. I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
I'm really thankful for this update and excited about it. I have a question, and I'm wondering if, I don't know if someone in this room will be able to answer it. Just for scale, what is, like compared in this room, what would 3,000 square feet be? I'm just trying to picture in my head. What is the square footage of this space?
I don't know what the square footage of this space is.
I just, yeah.
I don't know.
1,000, 1,500 maybe, I don't know.
Oh, so I mean, I'm thinking 3,000 square feet is pretty big. That's good. Yeah, that's why part of why I brought it up. I think being able to even this size of a square footage for community space, I think would be wonderful for our community. Hope Link's a wonderful organization that provides a strong variety of programs, and there are a couple that stand out to me, and I'm just going to, or the one that unfortunately is rising to front of mind for me is the need for food programs. Prices are not going to slow down as far as it, according to what I can see. So I know that our community is probably going to be in need of some support with food programs, and having a place that has that, I think would be wonderful. But on the other side of that, something just to maintain in your framework, whether it's Hope League or someone else, I think we did hear from our community, and I've heard this on the dais from quite a few council members, both previous and this council, the need for youth space. And so if there's something that we could do to create a gathering space, or, whomever takes that on, create some space for our youth to have safe areas to either learn or do sports or do something, come together, I think would be wonderful. So I want to thank you for your work on this. I know it's been a big year, and we're coming to a place where we're moving in a new, one direction for this. And I really want to see this project to fruition. I know how important it is to our community, and how I want to just truly express how valued your efforts are, and thank you.
Councilmember Shipnick.
Yeah, I'll tag on to Deputy Mayor. Thank you for both of you for your diligence in working on this, and just want to also really appreciate Imagine and the partners there for working with you on developing a code compliant proposal. I think that's quite remarkable. I mean, it would have been easy to try to, or maybe not so easy, to try to put something forward that maybe cost less or got more out of every square foot. But they really worked hard to try to not only meet our code, but also do the additional pieces that we want, like the ground floor space use. And I just think that's really laudable. Not all, as we know, developers go to those lengths. And I, for one, really appreciate it because we have code for a reason. And I think you have to have a pretty high bar to have a need, you have to have a pretty good reason for bringing forward a project that doesn't meet code.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for this presentation, for the update, super helpful. This is still a very exciting project. I'm really hopeful that we can get a partner that they can get a partner like HopeLink or somebody like that to serve the community, to join that partnership. I'm a little, maybe disappointed is too strong a word, a little bummed out to see a loss of 30+ units. But I understand why they are trying to fit this under current code, and I respect that. And either way, it'll still be a massive infusion of affordable housing into Kenmore, so appreciate that. Any further questions on this? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
City Manager.
Just one thing, on Wednesday is Juneteenth, and that's an official city paid holiday. But at the same time, we'll be running the farmers market that day and also having a Juneteenth event as part of the farmers market. And the DEIA advisory committee has been working hard to put that together. So I encourage you to attend, and we're going to have a special guest appear. Congresswoman Susan Delbene is coming at the beginning to say a few words. So we're excited about that.
Council member reports. Councilmember Culver.
Thank you, Mayor Herbig. A couple things. Some residents have brought up the Twin Springs Park and the proposed or planned parking lot on the north end, and some requesting that we do away with that we delete that. And I think adding to that, there's also, as some folks know and some folks may not know, there's a parking lot on the south side that I think is covered with like blackberry brambles and could be cleared out and used, et cetera. And I think there's some people that feel that that's probably going to cover us on our parking needs. So I would love to have a further conversation about this as a council, and I would love to get a second on that.
Second.
There we go. Can we go 2 for 2? The other thing is.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
We don't just put things on the agenda through a motion a second. There needs to be a majority or a consensus to add something to an agenda. So what the motion and second does is allow for conversation, for a short amount of conversation right now on that issue. So you would like to have a conversation about removing the parking at Twin Springs. Do you have more to say on laying out your case there, or can I open it up?
What I've heard is that it's been approved, but I think there's some, call it red tape, call it whatever. It's been held up for a little bit. And what I've heard from folks is like, nah, it seems like no skin off our back to take it out. So I think it makes sense.
Any other discussion on this, Councilman Marshall?
I generally like to see minimal parking in natural spaces, but we also gotta be mindful of ADA compliance and just general fairness to get our citizens there. I don't like the parking lots, but we've got to be able to get everybody there. I don't know enough about whether or not that other parking lot is ours or King County's perhaps, so I don't know enough about that, and be interested in hearing from staff, but I'm not opposed to it like being brought up at some point later.
Councilor Lutz?
I agree with that. And I think at the very least, maybe considering some sort of impervious alternative, whether that's a gravel lot or impervious pavement or something like that, to minimize and reduce the impacts that has on the environment while still meeting our ADA compliance. That might be something to consider there.
I think what you meant was pervious surface, but understood.
Excuse me, yes.
City Manager?
I was talking to Community Development Director Debbie Bent about this last week, and we would like to bring it up as at least a staff report to give you a status on it, because it's been a long time. We've been wrestling with the county for many years now on how to get access up there to that parking lot, and I believe it already is going to be a gravel lot, right, Debbie? Yeah. But the other thing is there is an old state capital grant attached to this project, about 150 grand from the state. It's been carried over from year to year to year to year to year to year to year. And I believe it was premised on building that little parking lot. We're not talking about a huge parking lot, like 5 cars or 7 cars or something like that. But yeah, there's definitely is the option of doing just the southern parking lot only, which already exists. But I just want you to understand the full ramifications of that change, including potential loss of the grant and ADA issues and other things like that. So we're happy to bring it forth at a council meeting. When were we thinking, Debbie? July? Okay.
Sounds like we're going to talk about it. All right.
Hang on 2 seconds, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thank you to the city manager, and I'm glad to hear we're looking at gravel there. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the update because I was a little rusty on the whole story. So I was concerned it was going to be asphalt. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're going to be having an update on this in July where we can have this discussion. And I would still strongly, I mean, other than Sunday mornings, there's a huge parking lot directly kitty corner, and we should be having conversations with the church about seeing if maybe we could lease a few of the spaces close to the park and then designate the spaces that we do have at the park for people with mobility issues. So yes, we will add that. We will have the discussion in July. Councilmember Culver, back to you.
Sweet. 2 for 2. Climate and solar and doing more ambitious work on this. I know we've got an update coming from staff in a week. I would love to potentially pair with that, or if not, sometime soon, a more ambitious discussion about climate and solar specifically. We have 2 years, according to the United Nations. We're getting down to a point where weeks matter and months matter. I don't need to give the full speech unless I need to give the full speech, but I'm going to holster that for the time being. We subsidize a lot of things. There's a lot of things that come into fruition using city resources that we have here. And I think the very least that we can do is send the elevator back down for future generations. And I feel very strongly about this, and I would like to have a conversation with council to discuss this at a greater length, and I would love to have a second.
Not seeing a second there, Councilmember. We will be discussing, of course, next week, and that would be an appropriate time to have some of these discussions.
Y'all got the right of first refusal. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Very much looking forward to this Wednesday's Juneteenth celebration.
Councilmember Sassen.
Ditto that. Just want to put out a general appreciation of staff now as ever.
Councilmember Shribnick.
Yeah, with the Regional Policy Committee, I know I mentioned last time that the SCA was supporting the crisis care levy, and it finally did pass the King County Council and the whole thing. It is done. So crisis care levy implementation plan is a thing, which is very exciting. The King Conservation District will be asking for a letter of support from the Sound Cities Association, of which, I'm sitting as a representative, for the rate increase, which, as I mentioned last time, is a few pennies on each parcel. So not a few pennies per mill rate, but a few pennies per parcel for single family homes, and then of course agricultural land and things like that, commercial land as well. So unless anybody, if anybody has an issue with us and there's of course more detail on their website, but if anybody has concerns about that letter of support that is anticipated in July, just let me know.
Councilmember Lucis.
Just a thank you to our staff. I mean, especially thank you to our our temporary Assistant City Clerk Ellie for stepping up. I know those are some big shoes to fill, so thank you for filling those and helping this be a very successful meeting. And thank you to all of our city staff, our city clerk and Debbie and Tamby and everyone else who is here to speak and present tonight. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
First, I want to thank Councilmember Culver for his persistence in bringing forward discussion about climate action and solar in particular. I want to clarify that I did not second because I am waiting to hear from staff and where our conversation goes on the 24th, which is just a week away. I'm hopeful that we can have a thorough conversation there and determine what's next and where we need to go. So I just want to recognize Councilmember Culver's efforts and make sure that, yeah, I just want to say, I think what you're bringing up is important. So thank you. I did have one thing. So today's my birthday. I'm just announcing it. And it's kind of a special day. I know it's a little, so where's the fun? It's right here. No. So I'm going to bring in something a little bit heavy that I might be bringing up more frequently, but it's in service of light. We're living, and I brought it up with language and our times when we're talking about just changing a few words, which I thought that those changes made sense. I didn't think there were a real corruption of language, but I wanted to bring up the conversation. But as we are living through, oh gosh, I can't find the times unseen before. Things are changing rapidly. Our relationships with our community members, our family, friends, people we don't know, people we see, we need to look at each other with compassion, not judgment, and understand that we are all working towards the same thing. So the first thing I just want to ask everyone to remember, take care of yourself first. Look to your heart, make sure your cup is full so that you have the space to understand or listen and respond with compassion to people who might be really on the other side of something you believe in. It's so important that we are looking towards our inner light and are able to shine it. And I'm not meaning to go to a religious place here. What I am saying is each of us here are a part of healing our nation. And it starts with the individual and as we grow out. And we as a council, I'm very thankful for the work that we're doing together. I'm very thankful for the staff, and I'm very thankful for our community members that come here with hope that they can make a difference. So let's just keep remembering that. My vision, I think most of our vision dreams for this world is a planet where all living beings thrive, where we are healthy and living in peace. And on that note, I want to thank you all for being here.
Not a lot to report. Did have a really interesting and fun ETP meeting last, when was that? Last Friday in person at Redmond City Hall. Got updates on Metro's safety and security, as well as an update from WashDOT's active transportation programs. It's good stuff. It was also just good to be in the room with other folks, you know, like human being instead of on Zoom, which is exhausting. So it's great to see everybody, really productive meeting. And with that, with no further business, we are adjourned.